Welcome to the Rundown on i24 News. Welcome back. We're still discussing Israel's decision to designate 6 Palestinian civil rights groups as terrorist organizations. Still with us is Samir Sinjalawi, a Fatah activist and chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund, joining us this evening from Cairo. And joining us now is Olga Deutsch, vice president of NGO Monitor, speaking to us from Petah Tikva. And Olga, this decision, one could assume, is in large part based on justified work done by your group, your research on these organizations. For example, El Haq, you said in your work for NGO Monitor, a leader in anti-Israel lawfare and BDS campaigns, and El Haq's general director, Shawan Jabarin, has been linked to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, a designated terrorist organization by the U.S., EU, Canada, and Israel. We heard Samir's view that this is just not accurate. What's your response to that?
Well, Caleb, thanks for having me. I wish we could take credit for the designation, but I'm afraid it's all the work of the security forces of Israel. This is way bigger than us and way more serious. We have been following these groups, that is correct, for over a decade, and have been seeing clear ties between their leaders and their senior officials and the designated terrorist organization PFLP. We are talking about 6 groups, although we identified 8. They participate in their meetings. A few of them were involved with the murder of Rina Schnurb. 50 people were arrested in August 2019. At least 5 of those were leaders and senior officials of some of these groups that have been designated last week. It is a very serious matter. It is a serious matter because it truly poses a security threat for the civilians here. But it is also a serious matter because basically we're talking about a network of NGOs that is operated by a terrorist organization that not only enjoys tremendous funds from the EU and other European governments, we're talking about more than $300 million since 2011, but also is granted an incredible platform and legitimacy because they go by the name human rights and humanitarian. So they sit around at decision-making tables in Europe and elsewhere in the world, influencing and impacting policies. And just like you said, many of that work actually evolves around anti-Israel lawfare, including in The Hague.
Okay, well, you talk about many of that work revolves around anti-Israel activities, but does doing things like bringing Israel to The Hague or supporting the boycott BDS movement, does that qualify? Would that qualify as terrorist activity, or should that be a reason that Israel, for example, bans these groups?
No, for sure not. This is the reason why pro-Israel advocacy groups should engage in a very critical public debate with them, which is exactly what all of us do. The reason I assume that the Israeli security forces designated them is because they unearthed information that qualifies them as a security threat. And in the press release issued on Friday by the Ministry of Defense, they say that basically these groups were used by PFLP to raise funds, and which were instrumental for PFLP, that officials of these organizations use these funds to recruit people for PFLP, to strengthen the network, to spread it, and to support terror activities. So this is not us saying, this is the Israeli security forces. Now, Caleb, the fact that these designations become political because we are talking about Palestinian so-called human rights groups is controversial, right? And it's a political discussion. But it in no way takes away from the fact that we're talking about 6 groups that have clear ties to a terror organization.
Samir, your response? Olga says, yes, we engage with these groups. We criticize their work on the political level, but this goes beyond this. Links with the PFLP are the reason for its designation of these specific groups as terror groups or terror-linked groups.
Well, what I can't understand really that now Israel announces the designation of these organizations as terror organizations, and at the same time, Israel begs and forces Qatar to pay millions of dollars each month to Hamas. This is really contradictory. I can't understand.
Okay, but that is a separate.
It's a separate issue.
That is a separate issue, Samir.
You are criticizing the European Union that they finance human rights organizations, and you are requesting from Qatar to pay in cash tens of millions of dollars each month to Hamas directly. Poison money that goes directly to Hamas in Gaza. And this is
I don't understand the connection between the two things that you're saying.
Samir, that
allow me, please, Olga. I think Olga would like to see UNRWA designated as a terror organization, would like to see B'Tselem, Hamuked, Haaretz maybe designated. Anybody that dares to criticize Israel or dares to criticize the human rights violation of Palestinians, even if the criticism goes to the PA or to other sides, they would like.
So you made a charge to Olga. Samir, you made a charge to Olga. Let her respond to that.
I would most certainly not like to see all these groups designated, only those that have their ties to terror groups. I dare any one of these groups to share a stage with me, which we have done many times, to have a civilized discussion on issues that clearly we do not agree on. But unfortunately, none of these groups would ever agree to a confrontational public discussion with us. I actually would like to see a Palestinian civil society that serves Palestinian people. What we see in practice is that instead of a Palestinian human rights group that fights for the right of women and for the place of women in the Palestinian society, instead of a Palestinian NGO that talks about the child abuse or any other human rights issue, everything is being hijacked by either terrorist, violent narratives or by politicized occupation, no occupation discussions. I think it is time that both the Palestinian and the Israeli human rights groups do a serious soul searching and figure out how they can truly promote human rights and defend human rights, as opposed to just serve as vehicles for hateful, discriminatory agendas. And unfortunately, in many cases, like in the case of Rina Schnurb, lethal and fatal narrative.
Well, we'll have to leave it. This discussion certainly should go on, and I'm sure it will go on. Samir Sinjalawi of the Jerusalem Development Fund and Olga Deutsch of NGO Monitor, thank you for joining.